Making headlines for this week of September the 12th. Scotch on the rocks. The people of Scotland face challenging decision ahead of national referendum. Rally for separation. Catalan region of Spain registers what is claimed to be the largest protest in European history to support sovereignty. Ditching dollars. More Russia-China dealing to eliminate third currency dollar transactions. And taking out the trash. Sweden has almost 0% trash, and they want more.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. Some interesting points are being revealed in this final week leading up to a referendum on independence of Scotland from the United Kingdom. Western leaders appear to be demonstrating some degree of concern over what a sovereign Scotland could mean for the UK itself. Even the Queen of England is alleged to have voiced concern over the impact of what a yes vote could mean for England. However, at the same time, there are some sources speculating that, given the declarations being made that Scotland will remain a proud member of the EU, this will in fact mean very little change, and that Scotland is merely trading off one master for another. We look first at the mood that appears to be present in Scotland leading up to the vote on September the 18th. Ned Simons, reporting for the HuffingtonPost.co.uk, wrote on September the 11th that half the Labour shadow cabinet travelled to Scotland today to campaign against Scottish independence. They were met in Glasgow by Scottish rebel Matt Ligett on a rickshaw, playing the Imperial Death March from Star Wars, who then chased them down the street.
People of Glasgow! Your Imperial Masters have arrived! Say hello to your Imperial Masters! People of Glasgow! Look at your Imperial Masters! These lovely people! They've travelled all the way from England to tell us that they are better to rule us than anybody else!
Ligett was saying that the people from England have come to tell the people of Scotland that they know better how to rule the country of Scotland. Simons continues by writing that the latest stage of campaigning comes as a new poll found that the No campaign has moved back into a narrow lead. The latest YouGov survey of almost 1,300 people for The Times and The Sun puts support for No at 52%, slightly ahead of Yes at 48% once the undecided voters are factored out. Simons quotes Alex Salmond, the leader of the Scottish National Party, or the SNP, as saying that a yes vote is the opportunity of a lifetime, the chance to take Scotland's future into Scotland's hands and to have confidence in our own ability to make a better future for the people of Scotland. The energy and confidence of the Yes campaign is energizing people and communities across Scotland and stands in stark contrast to the same old scaremongering from a distrusted and discredited Westminster establishment. It has been suggested that one of the reasons for the somewhat sudden turnaround in the support for the Yes campaign is due to the increase in the number of women who are now engaging in the campaign. Leslie Riddoch, reporting on the Guardian.com website, wrote on September the 11th that the weekend's seismic YouGov poll not only put the Yes campaign in the lead for the first time, this was the YouGov poll from last week as reported on CVN. This was showing a report for the Yes campaign as being 51% to the No at 49%, but showed support for independence among women as being up 14 points in the month to 47%. In other words, the long-running gender gap in the Yes campaign, which has ranged between 9 and 22%, appears to have been practically eliminated. Riddoch explains possible reasons for this, writing that first, the more that voters engage, the more likely they are to vote yes. According to research by Edinburgh University, provision of information does affect the likelihood to vote yes, mainly by reducing indecision, especially when a balanced set of arguments is presented, since the change option is the one which carries more uncertainties compared to maintaining the status quo. It seems women were more disengaged at the start of the campaign. This is partly because arguments seemed technical and abstruse, partly because debating styles were aggressive and aimed at winning plaudits from the usual suspects, male supporters and commentators, and partly because the editorial line of most papers in Scotland has been pro-union, making a balanced set of arguments hard to find. Second, as the penny dropped that women, not men, held the key to a yes vote, the focus of the wider yes movement changed to give more prominence to powerful female speakers. Third, women have always been less likely to be heart nationalists, more likely to admit if they don't know, and more open to quiet discussion and persuasion, not heated arguments. In a testosterone-fueled world of political analysis, that type of engagement was wrongly dismissed as dithering and indecision, which it is not. Finally, the general vibe has changed. Female voters now sense optimism about the possibility of real change, where there was previously a sense of uncertainty and difficulty. Riddoch notes that the sudden success hinges on Salmond and his deputy, Nicola Sturgeon. About Salmond, Riddoch writes that a change in tone by the once ebullient Alex Salmond, who stopped shouting, opened up a wider set of issues than currency, including health, poverty, bedroom tax, austerity, and Trident, referring to the nuclear missile issue, and scored with female voters in the first TV leaders debate, despite being judged the loser by political commentators. Salmond's wider subject choice, combined with the new, less smug tone, produced a victory among all groups in the final televised debate and was a game changer. About Sturgeon, Riddoch writes that the contribution from the Deputy First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, whose calm, surgical dissection of the former Scottish Secretary Michael Moore led to his replacement by the more bullish Alistair Carmichael, himself demolished by the impressive Sturgeon in a subsequent TV debate. Sturgeon's approval ratings in Scotland have topped those of all male performers, including Salmond, for more than a year. In a less sexist society, she would unquestionably have been named Person of the Match. Relentless positivity combined with well-constructed arguments by local, articulate, non-party political female yes volunteers, and a less aggressive tone from yes-supporting men has made yes a more attractive proposition. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister David Cameron was quoted by Tom McTague in the London Daily Mail as saying that if Scotland separated from the UK, it would break his heart, because to him, Cameron, it was an issue of the heart, and called upon the silent majority who reject Scottish independence to stand up against the nationalist bully boys. Considering all the truth that is now being revealed about the bullying and enslaving institutions and leaderships of the US, the UK, NATO, the EU, and more, this seems like a rather hypocritical statement to be making. McTague quotes Cameron asking the following questions. Why is it, suddenly, a good idea to make your sister working in Edinburgh or your brother working in London to live in a foreign country? Why is it, suddenly, a good idea to split away from the organizations that have helped this country to be everything it is in our world today? Correct me if I'm wrong, but does there not seem to be something unusual about that second question? He's not talking about splitting away from the country that has become what it is, but rather the organizations that have helped the UK become what it is today. To which organizations is he referring specifically? And, given the revelations coming out at this time, what exactly is he saying when he says everything that the UK has become? An article appearing in the London Mirror on September 7th by Jason Beattie and Victoria Murphy reported that the Queen is said to be privately horrified at the prospect of Scotland voting for independence from the UK. Now, of course, this may once again open the debate as to the true legitimacy of Queen Elizabeth as monarch of England, as there appears to be evidence to suggest that Elizabeth is not a true and legitimate monarch. Why would the Scottish people want to be under the control of a corporate government with an illegitimate monarch? The article also notes how UK Finance Minister George Osborne is trying to tempt voters with a cross-party plan to give some more powers to Scotland. There is another point being revealed this week, however. There is a growing wave of discontent within the UK as to whether the people want to have any connection with the European Union. The leadership of Scotland is currently advocating a desire to be a full and proud member of the EU. This does raise a possible question of suspicion as to the nature of the goal of the Scottish referendum. Are the people of Scotland being fed the illusion of sovereignty from sources connected to the EU, so that they can separate from the UK, only to become slaves to another entity that may be seeking to get control of oil in Scotland? RT posted an article on September the 11th with comments from UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage. The outspoken EU critic was very direct when commenting on Scottish sovereignty, or at least the illusion of it. The article writes that anti-Englishness is driving the Scottish independence campaign, according to UKIP leader Nigel Farage, who says a split from England would fail to give Scots independence from EU bureaucrats in Brussels. Farage, who described Prime Minister David Cameron as epitomizing all that the Scottish people viscerally loathe about England, said that he has walked straight into a long-planned ambush, referring to David Cameron. In an article for The Telegraph, Farage described the Scottish National Party as the voice of anti-Englishness and claimed that the Scottish electorate has been sold a pig in a poke. The problem for Scots, though, is if they vote yes next week, they will not get independence. Rather, they are voting for rule by Brussels, Farage said. As Mr. Cameron has brutally discovered, no EU member is truly independent. Those supporting a yes vote have previously argued against claims independence would merely make Scotland a puppet of Brussels. An independent Scotland will be an enthusiastic member of the EU in line with our long-held international and outward-looking focus and values, Salmond had said. So Farage has offered what appears to be a somewhat tangible reason for Scotland to choose to remain within the Union, because together, combined with the growing support of the UKIP party to separate from direct ties to the cabal-controlled EU, they could perhaps take a stronger step towards real independence on a future day. Admittedly, this was an argument that I had not considered until now. So an interesting scenario has developed. If Scotland chooses to allegedly become sovereign from the UK, will they choose to be fully sovereign and perhaps align with the BRICS alliance, or will they choose another slave master that is the unelected leadership of the EU? Are EU controllers worried about the anti-EU sentiment in the UK to the point that they would try to incite a separation in order to get better control of Scottish resources? Suddenly, I'm not so sure I envy the choice now facing the Scottish people. In other geopolitical news, and still related to the idea of sovereignty, RT reported on September the 11th that Spain may have become the location for what may arguably be Europe's biggest rally ever. RT has this story.
As well, Scottish independence, maybe not. Well, that referendum just around the corner, and there are renewed calls then for succession being heard across Europe. And it's particularly true in Spain, where Catalans are flocking to the streets of the regional capital, Barcelona. Now, as I speak, in celebration of National Catalan Day. There are the latest pictures from Barcelona now. Hundreds of thousands of people there calling for the region's independence, an issue which is a mock referendum being held in November. Well, Matt Trezor's joining us from Barcelona live now. Hello, Matt. Looks like a nice day. A lot of people turned out for it. What is the mood on the streets? What's the real feeling you're getting there about it?
Kevin, the feeling here is a celebratory one. Up to 2 million people, organizers claim, are clogging the streets of Barcelona behind me here. This, they say, is the largest public demonstration in European history, according to them. They're marking this in the year 1714, when Catalonian independence fell to Spanish troops when they occupied the city of Barcelona. And you can see behind me here now people decked out in the Catalonian colors of red and yellow, not only on their bodies, but also on their balconies, on their cars, on their motorcycles. Everywhere around the city where you had gone today, there were the Catalonian colors flying, including from Barcelona's iconic Sagrada Familia Cathedral. There's a huge red and yellow banner flying from that as well today. Local leaders saying that they feel economically, politically, and socially the region of Catalonia should be independent from Spain. Now, of course, all this, as was mentioned, leading up to a November 9th non-binding referendum on Catalonian independence from Spain. That's a vote that, if it goes ahead, is one that Madrid is sure not to recognize. So what happens after that remains to be seen. We're live in Barcelona. Kevin?
Thanks for the update, Mark. A lot of people turned out there. Big turnout for it. All right, catch you later. Now, here are some of the reasons Catalans think that they have a right to go it alone. Let's take a look at where it is on the map, as you can see. Well, it's Spain's wealthiest region for a start. It's responsible for around a fifth of the country's economic output. However, in return, it only receives 9% of the national budget. You might or might not think that fair. It also has a large population. About 16% of Spaniards live there. And according to polls, more than half of them think Catalonia can be successful if it goes it alone. Most Catalonians are convinced their region's capable of providing for itself. Output per person comfortably exceeds the national average. In fact, it's higher even than the European Union's average. However, experts say there are still some fundamental differences, though, between the Catalan case and the Scottish case. Let's listen.
Will be a political precedent, and the Catalan nationalists would say, look, here is a democratic way of resolving this. We could change the Spanish constitution or reinterpret it so as to permit this. But the position of the Spanish government and the Constitutional Court is a very rigid one, and they say we've just got to go by the letter of the law, and the Constitution says it's not possible, and that's the end of the story. In the United Kingdom, there is an agreement between the UK and the Scottish government about the procedure, and in Catalonia, there is no agreement whatsoever. The Spanish government has said no.
The trick to observe, although perhaps not 100% accurate, is to see how the mainstream covers these stories, or if they choose to cover them at all. The guiding theory is that if the mainstream media are giving attention to a story, the odds are much higher that there is an agenda behind that story that the cabal-controlled media establishment are wanting to sell to people. It would make sense that the Western media do not want the people of the world learning about how the people of Europe have become fed up with the disillusion of EU membership, the criminally fraudulent bailout loans that benefit certain people in countries, while the austerity cuts and repayments of these loans are dumped upon the poorer majority. September the 8th, on the news.ca.msn.com website, the Indigenous tribes of Canada seem to be picking up on the wave and energies of sovereignty, and they now have a court precedent for their actions. Declared its sovereignty over 80,000 square kilometers of territory and says any development in that area must get its approval. Armed with a Supreme Court of Canada judgment recognizing ancestral rights for First Nations in British Columbia, the Atikamequa want to have their say on projects located in the Nitikaskinan region. Constant Awashish, Grand Chief of the Atikamequa First Nation, says 35 years of territorial negotiations with governments have provided nothing. The article adds that in June, Canada's highest court granted declaration of Aboriginal title to more than 1,700 square kilometers of land in British Columbia to the Tsilicotan First Nation. It was the first time the court has made such a ruling concerning Aboriginal land. The ruling addressed how Aboriginal title is determined and whether provincial laws apply to those lands. Jean Roche, Ottawa, the Manawan chief, said his community is not opposed to development per se. We only oppose development that threatens our culture and way of life, he said. We must act. The elected Atikamequa officials said they will use all means at their disposal to defend their interests. Over to Israel now, where international tension continues to mount on the leadership of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. An article by Barak Ravid on Israel's Haaretz website on September 9th writes that envoys of 5 European countries have submitted a joint official protest to Prime Minister Netanyahu's office against the land expropriation in the West Bank that the government announced last week. The ambassadors of Britain, France, Italy, and Spain said the deputy ambassador of Germany delivered the written protest to National Security Advisor Yossi Cohen during a meeting in the Prime Minister's office on Monday and stressed that Israel's declaration of nearly 1,000 acres of land in Gush Etzion, south of Jerusalem, as state land had greatly angered the countries of the European Union. We gave him a clear message that it was a very bad decision in a terrible timing and that we hope it will be reversed, a European diplomat said. The land claim movement began around August 31st and is believed to have been in response to the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israelis in June. The particular annexation of land appears to create territorial continuity between an area called the Green Line and the Gush Etzion settlement block. Despite the action angering the U.S. and Europe, Israeli National Security Advisor Yossi Cohen has not revealed any hints that the protests will change the Israeli position regarding the land grab. Meanwhile, in another Haaretz article on September the 9th by Orhan Koskun, he reports that Turkey is unlikely to sign any energy deals with Israel for the construction of a gas pipeline to Turkey because of a deepening political rift over Israel's Gaza offensive. This, according to Turkish Energy Minister Taner Yildiz, said on Tuesday. Ties were severely damaged following a deadly raid by Israeli commandos on a Turkish yacht carrying pro-Palestinian activists defying a Gaza blockade back in 2010. But Israeli firms had more recently held fruitful talks with Turkish private companies and energy officials as part of a tentative rapprochement. However, Israel's recent Operation Protective Edge that resulted in the deaths of over 2,000 Palestinians undermined those efforts and infuriated Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who likened Israel's actions to those of Hitler. There are, however, whistleblowers within the ranks of the Israeli army who are courageously standing up and speaking out, apparently. One such whistleblower, Iran Efrati, gave a presentation in the U.S. back in March. The speaking tour with Maya Wind was called the Soldier and the Refusenik U.S. Tour. An article on the digital-resistance.com website from last July carried Efrati's story. According to this article, Efrati was born and raised in Jerusalem. After graduating high school, he enlisted in the Israeli Defense League, the IDF. In 2009, he was discharged and joined Breaking the Silence, an organization of veteran Israeli soldiers working to raise awareness about the daily reality in the occupied territories. He worked as the chief investigator of the organization, collecting testimonies from IDF soldiers about their activities. He also guided political tours into the West Bank and worked to educate Israeli youth about the reality of being a soldier in an occupying army. His collected testimonies appear in the booklet Operation Cast Lead and their most recent release, Our Harsh Logic. Since leaving Breaking the Silence, his investigative reports appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Guardian. Today, he is active with the Israeli groups Anarchists Against the Wall and Boycott from Within. A 40-minute video of his presentation is on this website, and the article highlights 13 points of his presentation, which are as follows. There is a heavy indoctrination in Israel from an early age in schools, which uses the Holocaust to create paranoia and fear against the enemy, quote unquote. Israeli soldiers are trained intensively for a war, whilst their actual military duties are to subdue and control Palestinians. Israeli soldiers routinely humiliate, intimidate, arrest, beat, and kill civilian Palestinians to protect illegal Jewish settlers in occupied territories. Many Israeli soldiers are aware what they are doing is wrong but have no way out and feel pressured to continue. Palestinians who require medical attention have to go through military checkpoints. To do this, they require permits that are given to lawyers of the Doctors Without Borders program, who then prevent them from going to the West Bank, and Israel uses a clever process to cover itself legally to the world. During Operation Cast Lead, Israeli soldiers were traumatized and confused by the atrocities they saw in Gaza, such as the bombing of civilian areas to clear the way for Israeli ground forces, use tank shells, airstrikes, and illegal white phosphorus. When wanting to speak out via the Breaking the Silence campaign, the Haaretz newspaper refused to publish soldier testimonies after pressure by an IDF spokesman. Breaking the Silence campaign itself was censored by the IDF spokesman because all media in Israel has to go through the IDF censorship. The Israeli government and military make a lot of money by selling its weapons to other repressive regimes around the world. Israel tries and tests its weapons on Palestinians, and this is not just an occupation. This is a laboratory for Israeli military weapons. Israel uses undercover units in the occupied territories to start riots and then justify the use of weapons against Palestinian protesters. All police departments in the U.S. are trained by the Israeli military and are taught the same brutal tactics used against Palestinians. U.S. police departments have already used such tactics in suppressing protests in the U.S., such as the Occupy movement. And finally, Efrati says, hit Israel where it hurts the most. Boycott Israel. The link to a 40-minute video by Efrati sharing this information will appear in the show summary. In Iraq now, reports are indicating that several months after the national election, there may now be a government in place. Given all the rumors and innuendo that have been circulating about events, particularly in Iraq, CVN is choosing to exercise caution on what is being claimed as truth in terms of what we are hearing at this time. However, Katie Sargent, reporting for Reuters, has this story.
A new government for Iraq being sworn in on Monday night. It will be headed by Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi, a Shiite, but it will include members of Iraq's Sunni and Kurdish minorities as well. Abadi faces the challenge of unifying the country after it lost ground in northern Iraq over the summer to Islamic State fighters. He vowed to rebuild the army, which nearly collapsed in the face of the fighting.
We pledge to support the military operations in all the areas of confrontation with the armed gangs and the terrorist forces, and to ensure it continues until victory is achieved.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the new government will be a cornerstone in the fight against Islamic State.
The Iraqi parliament approved a new and inclusive government, one that has the potential to unite all of Iraq's diverse communities for a strong Iraq, a united Iraq, and to give those communities the chance to build the future that all Iraqis desire and deserve.
Kerry said he would travel to the Middle East on Tuesday, but Iraq is not on his official itinerary. He is scheduled to visit Jordan and Saudi Arabia.
According to the BBC on September the 8th, many Sunni rebels were recruited to Islamic State's ranks as it seized large swaths of Iraq, capitalizing on growing tension between the Sunni minority and the Shia-led government. However, many have since indicated that they would be ready to turn against the IS if Sunni rights were enshrined in a reformed political order in Baghdad. There had been a constitutional deadline to get a government into place, and in true showmanship form, just like politicians in the U.S., a big global facade was put on to delay the process until the very last minute. The BBC article also noted that while many key posts went to the majority Shia community, Sunnis and Kurds were also well represented. The Kurdish bloc said its participation was conditional on all outstanding issues between Baghdad and Kurdistan being resolved within 3 months, and on the government paying Kurdistan's budget allocation, which has been withheld for more than 9 months, to be paid within 1 week. Mass amounts of information and disinformation continue to flow out regularly concerning the group known as ISIL or ISIS. Some sources have claimed that this group is merely a rebranded version of Al-Qaeda, a group that has, perhaps suspiciously, disappeared from significant coverage, perhaps due to all the information that is revealing that Al-Qaeda was merely a creation instrument of the CIA. Assuming this to be true, one might be led to the conclusion, therefore, that if Al-Qaeda is CIA, and if ISIL is a rebranded Al-Qaeda, then therefore ISIL must also be very connected to the CIA. Discernment is always advised when listening to any reports relating to Iraq, Iran, Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, and others. Observe how the mainstream media reacts and observe who it is that they are quick to demonize. As mentioned moments ago, this is often a sign that deeper investigation is required to determine why someone or some country are being demonized. Since arriving over here in Sweden, I have been somewhat amazed at the numerous synchronicities that have unfolded in so many different aspects. Frederick, who has been a long-time listener to CVN, has been exceptionally kind in introducing me to some great people here in Sweden who are attempting to share information and help the people of the country to heal and awaken. You will be learning about a few of these people over the coming weeks. One of these synchronicities has involved the fact that I arrived over here just ahead of an election. Professor Karl Arfors, one of the wonderful souls I have met, specializes in microcirculation, diet, and health. He introduced me to a new political party in Sweden called Enhet. Enhet, in English, would translate to unity, the Unity Party. Until now, I had never seen a political party whose platform worked with a message of unity while recognizing Einstein's quote, that no problem can be solved from within the same paradigm of thinking that caused it. The Unity Party brands itself as the politics of humanity and nature. According to the website, during the 1900s, we have technologically developed our material existence so far that we now threaten to destroy our planet, our only survival resource. We made use of the rational and intellectual commitment to action. This has been at the expense of our inner life, where joy, creativity, love, peace, and meaningfulness are important qualities for us to feel contentment and harmony. In the 2000s, we believe that the community needs to be developed from an intellectual approach to a more intuitive thinking with more focus on the inner life. The problems we face today cannot be solved only with changes in the external, nor with the same way of thinking that has created the problems, to quote Einstein. Thus, the solutions must come from a different starting point. The party vision is stated as follows and has 3 primary levels of addressing change. Visions are necessary for the development of society. We need to know where we want to reach in order to understand what decisions we should take to get there. Today, unfortunately, politics is characterized by short-term solutions and lack of vision. The Unity Party sees change happening at least 3 levels. 1, the individual level, where the greatest possible freedom to shape your life as you want is limited only by everyone else's equal right to the same freedom. Creation of outer peace comes through inner peace, where an active peace work begins with healing ourselves to the world. Collaboration with other people beyond selfishness and vested interests. A society where even our emotional and existential needs are acknowledged and met. At the community level, where an interest-free speculation and inflation-free society based on man's basic need and where money is used only as a medium for the exchange of goods and services. A basic income instead of different contributions paid to all people. To ensure that all people have the right to a basic security in that we are all part of the same community. A society that promotes human relations, local employment, alternative energy, small scale, and the country's self-sufficiency. A well-developed, cheap, and environmentally friendly communication system that makes it easier for us humans to meet and be together. Meaningful employment for all, benefiting both the individual and society as a whole. To serve each other with our work instead of making the work of others. Prioritize all human care as child care, disability and old age care, and health care. A school with a holistic approach and a focus on human development to creative, intuitive, and secure individuals who use their education to their own and society's benefit. A society free from drug abuse, crime, violence, and bullying. A developed and deepened democracy based on people's participation and responsibility, and a political system that promotes cooperation and unity instead of power struggles and vested interests. The third area or level of change that the Unity Party envisions is a world in harmony and balance with nature, in that we treat it as one with ourselves and prioritize life and ecological balance in front of materialism and unilateral economic growth. A common ethical and moral foundation that bridges cultural, traditional, national, international, and religious issues. A worldwide collaboration that coordinates the resources of the earth for human basic needs and creates environmentally sound conditions for a durable, secure, and peaceful existence of our planet. CVN has sent a request to connect with this party and perhaps discuss global events and solutions that are part of my other work for global peace and healing. It is intriguing to see a group of people actually making an attempt to put forth these kinds of values within the political spectrum in Sweden, or anywhere for that matter. It will be interesting to see how many people begin to resonate with this platform and observe how this party may grow. Taking a look at some financial news for this week, things are somewhat quiet on the geo-economic front, but one story on the BricsPost.com website on September the 9th has further hinted at the move away from the US dollar as the global reserve currency. According to the article, Russia and China have begun discussions on new joint projects worth up to $1 billion in infrastructure, agriculture, and petrochemicals. In a major highlight of an investment meet on Tuesday, Moscow and Beijing have entered into a pact to boost use of the ruble and the yuan for trade transactions. During its maiden meeting in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, the Russia-China Investment Cooperation Commission discussed 32 bilateral investment projects on Tuesday, this according to Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Igor Shuvalov. Shuvalov said the project's costs ranges from hundreds of millions to around $1 billion. The projects are related to transport, infrastructure, petrochemical complexes, and the extraction, processing, and delivery of natural resources through the Far East region and development of the agricultural sector, Shuvalov was quoted by Russian agency RIA Novosti. We're going to encourage companies from the two countries to settle more in local currencies to avoid using a currency from a third country, he said, referring to the US dollar. Many Western sources continue to try to paint Russia as being more isolated, although if one is willing to dig deeply enough, the unfolding events only seem to hurt the global cabal structures in the US, and ultimately it will hurt the global cabal structures in the EU, as disgruntled farmers join the growing movement against the EU structures for imposing sanctions upon Russia that the farmers never agreed nor consented to. In a separate but related story on September the 11th, the BRICS Post reported that the more powerful, unelected governing body of the EU, the European Council, has imposed new sanctions upon Russia. This article writes that the European Union Council decided on Thursday to go ahead with a new set of sanctions targeting Russian banks, firms, officials, and companies operating on the continent. The new sanctions, which had been prepared over the past 2 weeks but never announced as a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine went into effect, are designed to further pressure Moscow to limit its engagement in the country where a de facto civil war has raged since mid-April. EU Council President Herman Van Rompuy had previously said the sanctions, which go into effect on Friday, were designed to persuade Russia to remove itself as a quote-unquote destabilizing factor in eastern Ukraine. The EU, Kiev, and the US have accused Russia of pouring soldiers and weapons into eastern Ukraine over the past few weeks, a strategy they claim which helped turn the tide in the favor of pro-Moscow rebels looking to secede from the rest of the country. Russia has countered that the EU is not willing to see what Russia has helped accomplish. The article continues. Meanwhile, neighboring Belarus has offered to host a follow-up meeting of Russia, Ukraine, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, and representatives of the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics to ensure the success of the ceasefire agreement reached last week. The ceasefire came into effect in eastern Ukraine on September the 5th after Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed a 7-point peace plan for the region, with the first step being an immediate ceasefire between separatist rebels and Ukrainian forces. The ceasefire appears to be holding. In a bid to turn the ceasefire into a permanent peace plan and political solution to the Ukraine crisis, Austrian Chancellor Werner Faymann announced on Thursday that he is ready to mediate between all sides of the conflict. If one wants to prevent war, one has to put in motion political activities in order to prevent military ones, he told a local newspaper. The issue is very divisive. I, personally, have had a Ukrainian friend, someone whom I have known for almost 10 years, take the step to unfriend me from Facebook because she felt that I was against the particular view that she had. Her husband also took the step to unfriend me. It has been hard for the people of Ukraine to make a fair choice. They have been hurt deeply in the past by the old Soviet Russia, and this cannot be denied. At the same time, they are intoxicated by the allure of the Western dream, the same dream that so many Westerners are now beginning to see as equally corrupt and destructive, if not more so, because it is being done quietly and with the uninformed consent of the people. Like Scotland, they are trading off one perceived threat to step into the lair of another. It is by intentional design that this global cabal seeks to keep people in division so that they will not awaken to and reclaim the power that is now being claimed in other parts of Europe. Here is the guarantee I believe I can make. So long as there are parties involved who profit on some level, directly or indirectly, from states of conflict. And so long as there is no one who is willing to stand up and expose this, then there is absolutely no peace plan that will work. Any plan for peace will have to come from outside of the paradigm in which all the conflicts were created. There are several reasons forming for why Russia is being demonized at this time. One is the fact that Russia is moving forward with its allies in creating a system of trade that excludes the US dollar, which has been a huge source of profit for the global banking cabal. Another reason is the fact that Russia and its allies are moving forward to create an international development bank that will at least rival, if not replace, the World Bank and possibly the IMF. A third reason is that there is corporate interests being claimed by companies like Monsanto that want to get their foot into the European door by controlling the agricultural lands of Ukraine for GMO testing and product growth. A fourth reason is that the global banking cabal realizes that the people of the world are starting to see through their games much more quickly, and thus they need to find a way to create enough global fear that will support the rebirth of the NATO alliance. The U.S. has suffered what appears to be a huge setback with all the revelations by Edward Snowden, and this also will require some kind of globally distracting event that will either create fear that justifies war or sufficiently distracts the global population from finding the true sources of all the false flag events so that the next event can hopefully be planned and executed. Another, less known reason is that Russia appears to have undertaken an agenda to release the existence of our galactic families more formally to the people of Russia, if not to the world at large. There will no doubt be other reasons that have not yet filtered out into public awareness via courageous whistleblowers. What is really challenging here is to try to read between the lines. The vast majority of listeners are fully aware that there has been a previously secret global cabal of bankers that is attempting to drum up wars and conflicts for the purpose of profit, but also to reduce human populations of those who would and are rising up against them. There are other forces, both from within the culprit institutions and culprit bodies of governance, that are seeking to work to bring about positive change, but have to do so in a way that is as digestible as possible for the masses, so they do not overreact with fear and give power back to those linked to cabal interests. We are witnessing choices being made that may at first appear to be negative, and it is possible that they are, although it may also be possible that certain negative choices and events were necessary to begin engaging the general public. This highlights the importance of not blindly giving your attention to one side or the other, but to merely observe while sending out as much peaceful energy and love you can to assist others in making the choice or finding the awareness that is for the highest good of all at this time. In general news for this week, it was last year at this time that I really was wanting to create would be the last time that the 9/11 issue would be considered newsworthy. The only difference this year is that the campaign for greater awareness is moving into more the mainstream consciousness and perhaps to some degree the mainstream media itself. The architects and engineers for 911 Truth and the Rethink911.org group have been especially active in the months leading up to this year's campaign to finally get Building 7 into the awareness of the general public and to help the public realize how impossible it is for a superstructure to collapse into its own footprint after allegedly being hit by a plane. The fact that this happened twice makes it even more impossible, and then to also see that a third building that was not hit by anything somehow manages to also fall into its footprint after a few small fires pushes the odds well beyond the range of possible. The campaign is in high gear, however, on numerous different fronts. One major success being claimed by the AE 9/11 group relates to the release of its latest documentary, 911 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. According to their website, this documentary is nearing, and by now probably past, 1 million views on the pbs.org website. This is the result of the expert testimony from the 43 building and technical professionals appearing in the film and the courage of Sherry Burnson, program director at Colorado Public Television, the first TV station in the nation to air Experts Speak Out. The special presentation also funded the station's August membership pledge drive, where 400 DVDs were put into the hands of their members, and AE 9/11 Truth founder Richard Gage was interviewed on air. The special screening received 84,000 views during the week of the 9/11 anniversary alone. There were 275 online comments about the film, almost all positive, on the CPT-12 website by November 13th. This would be last year, making it one of the most commented programs in the station's history. It also became the most watched and most shared video in September on the national PBS website. In Canada, the Rethink911.org campaign caused a stir in the national capital of Ottawa last year by posting ads on local transit buses, asking people if they knew that a third building fell on 9/11. The local media, in an attempt to smear the campaign, introduced the story this way.
This is the 12th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on the U.S., what has come to be known, of course, as 9/11. And this week, you may have noticed ads on OC Transpo buses related to that horrific event.
But if you look closer, there are actually ads calling into question whether the attacks were caused by terrorists at all. C. Fisher reports.
Andres Cerro likes to check out the ads on OC Transpo buses. Last night, he saw one that shocked him. He snapped this picture and tweeted us to say, "Are you kidding me? Look at the ad that OC Transpo puts up."
Well, it's disrespectful and distasteful, especially with September 11 today.
The local TV station did not ask the individual why he felt it was disrespectful. They just left the comments as they were so that people could formulate their own conclusions. That story led to debate within the board of directors of the transit company as people were challenging the company to revisit its advertising policy, while also having the story appear in several local and mainstream news media outlets. Earlier this year, the group launched a wave of ads in the Toronto transit system, exposing the city's 1.2 million people to the ads over a 2-week period. In New York City, a huge video billboard has been reserved to run the collapse of Building 7, while also asking people if they knew of Building 7 and that they should begin to rethink 9/11. The Rethink 9/11 group has a petition online with a little more than 18,000 signatures on it. In a few moments, you will hear more about a man named John Lear in a Disclosure News story for the week. Lear has an extensive background in the airline industry with covert ops and knowledge about UFOs. On the website, greatdreams.com, there is some text of an interview between Lear and Art Bell of Coast to Coast AM radio sometime in the past. Here are a few comments made by Lear with regards to 9/11. According to Lear, whoever concocted 9/11, and it certainly wasn't Osama bin Laden, they had two objectives. One was to polarize Americans' opinion against Arab Muslims, and number two was to get the U.S., trick the U.S., essentially to get Osama out of Afghanistan, because Osama, as bad as he was shutting down all the heroin poppy fields and was causing a disastrous monetary loss to the illegal drug industry. And last year, which was a year after we went into Afghanistan, National Geographic did a special on TV that ran for several months and documented the 500% increase in drugs flowing out of Afghanistan after we went in there and eliminated Osama. We were tricked into thinking that Osama was responsible for 9/11, but to get a proper perspective on who did the World Trade Center, you have to understand what a magnificent feat of airmanship this was. It was disastrous and was horrible for this country, but this was not accomplished by some guys who went to Florida, got some instructions on a Cessna or a Piper, and this was not accomplished by somebody who had a right seat on a 727. This had to be accomplished by pilots who got instruction, were taken to honest-to-God Boeing 757 simulators, which is, you know, the 757 and the 767, are basically the same in terms of cockpit structure, and you get the same rating. And whoever concocted this whole thing knew that on a particular day that airplanes themselves could be switched because of maintenance problems, and by selecting airlines that had that airplane, they had everything covered. Lear goes on to say that he felt it would take about 200 or 300 hours for each pilot to learn how to step into the cockpit. They had to get in there and pull the circuit breaker for the transponder, sit in the pilot seat, disconnect the autopilot from the flight management system, turn the airplane, push the throttles all the way forward, find Manhattan, then line up on a pre-planned course doing 10 miles a minute. To fly an airliner like the size of a 757 at 700 feet took some skill, and that takes a long time to train for, probably a year. At the time when this interview was originally recorded, it appears that Lear was believing that a plane had hit the Pentagon, when there are now videos surfacing showing that it was not a plane but more likely a missile. The evidence also supports the fact that no plane went down in Pennsylvania either, although Lear does not discuss this. There is another group for 9/11 Truth called Pilots for 9/11truth.org. This organization of professional pilots offers its own evidence from experienced professionals that calls into question the ability for untrained Muslim pilots to accomplish the incredible feats that they were alleged to have accomplished. The link to the documentary and other relevant info will be found, as always, in the show summary. In disclosure news this week, a video was posted to YouTube on September the 1st, but it is not exactly clear the date when the original call took place. As mentioned a few moments ago, John Lear, he is a well-known whistleblower on various issues relating to UFOs. The livingmoon.com website describes John Lear and his background as follows. Lear, a captain for a major U.S. airline, has flown over 160 different types of aircraft in over 50 different countries. He holds 17 world speed records in the Lear jet and is the only pilot ever to hold every airline certificate issued by the Federal Aviation Administration. Mr. Lear has flown missions worldwide for the CIA and other government agencies. A former Nevada state senator candidate, he is the son of William P. Lear, designer of the Lear Jet executive airplane, the 8-track stereo, and founder of Lear Stiegler Corporation. Lear became interested in the subject of UFOs 13 months ago, from whenever this was first written, after talking with United States Air Force personnel about who had witnessed a UFO landing at Bentwaters Air Force Base near London, England, and 3 small aliens walking up to the wing commander. The website greatdreams.com added that during the late 1980s, Lear tracked down and found the Army intelligence analyst who read, probably by accident, the U.S. government report Grudge 13, which documented the history of the UFO cover-up in the U.S. and details of saucer recoveries, disposition of their occupants, and handling of civilian witnesses. The report included clear photographs of these recovered extraterrestrial craft and beings found inside. It further detailed how recoveries were made worldwide and specifically designed transports to accommodate the craft. Since that time, John has learned many incredible and interesting facts about the solar system and planets, including the existence of huge structures, arches, bridges, and domes on the moon, cities on Mars, huge extraterrestrial ships mining the rings of Saturn, the incredible but secret agenda of Apollo 17, to the huge rectangular opening in the South Massif on the Taurus Littrow Highlands called Nansen. Lear suspects that Venus does not have the sulfuric acid atmosphere with an 800-degree temperature that we've all been led to believe, and instead is a planet very similar to ours, but with a similar but more technologically advanced civilization. Sometime recently, John was a guest on the radio program Coast to Coast AM, and a woman called in, apparently seeking John's help in resolving what she claimed was a 27-year mystery.
Line, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hi, I'm Jackie. I'm from, North Las Vegas.
Okay, Jackie, go ahead.
Okay. John, I'm hoping you can solve the 27-year-old mystery for me. Do you know what was going on in 1979?
Where?
Well, on Mars.
No.
Okay.
What was going on in 79 on Mars?
Well, I used to work at NASA during that time and handling downlink telemetry, and one night on our video monitors while the little Viking rover was running around, I see two men in suits, not necessarily space suits. I mean, they looked protective, but they didn't look like the bulky things that, on Earth not use. But they came over the horizon walking towards the Viking Explorer, and our vision got cut off. I didn't see what they did with it or anything else.
They were probably making repairs.
Well, that's why I was wondering if they were our guys or not.
They were.
You know what kind of suits they wore?
Pardon?
Do you know what kind of suits they wore?
Well, they wouldn't have to wear very much. I mean, the atmosphere is, there's enough atmosphere to walk around without a spacesuit on Mars, same as there is on the moon. I mean, it's like about 15,000 feet on Earth. Now, you can go through a 24-hour acclimatization program on the moon, and you can walk around without a spacesuit. Same thing on Mars. You don't need a spacesuit. If they had one, it was just minimal.
Did you have any other witnesses there while you saw this?
Well, there's about out of the workers, there's probably about a half a dozen of us, because we were, you see the typical NASA things where they got all the monitors.
Oh, yeah. So you had a few people out there monitoring the monitors.
Yeah, you got about, the people that were up there, and then there's about a half a dozen of us downstairs, because, it was just maintaining the equipment, because if anything went wrong, we had to get it up quick so they didn't miss the telemetry.
You folks must have been amazed at what you saw.
Yeah, because, when we saw that, they cut off our video downstairs. Of course, we ran upstairs, and they've got almost side doors upstairs. They have those little windows. I don't know if you been there?
I have not, no.
Okay. Well, they got those side doors going up to the back, what we call nosebleed section in most stadiums and stuff. But anyway, you come up there, and we could look through the little window in that because they had just locked the door, and they normally don't lock it on us. But anyway, they just locked the door, and then they came, we saw some more on their monitors, and then they came over with some paper to take those doors.
They clipped it. Can you imagine
that? I appreciate you calling and telling us that story. It is great, and it just confirms what's going on.
Can you imagine that, John? There they are looking at their telemetry, and they spot the monitors, and they're looking at the rover piece of it, and all of a sudden they see two human beings walking into the scene?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like Mars rover cleaning off dust. They had their paper towels and Windex and cleaned out so it could receive the signal.
As always, use your own discernment and allow yourself to be guided towards researching information that resonates most closely with you in the current moment of now. Use that information to grow your own awareness. In tech news for this week, I would like to give a quick acknowledgement to the Huffington Post Canada and several other sources that have picked up on a story I covered almost a year ago and had planned to revisit while here in Sweden. It was a story about how Sweden has almost zero waste in the country, and in fact they get paid to import trash from other countries. The fact that this story came out by reporter Zian Lum only in the last week or two makes the story very up to date, and it has saved me a lot of work. So I thank Ms. Lum and HuffPo Canada. The story appeared on their website on September the 2nd. Ms. Lum writes that there's a recycling revolution happening in Sweden, one that has pushed the country closer to zero waste than ever before. In fact, less than 1% of Sweden's household garbage ends up in landfill sites today. The Scandinavian country has become so good at managing waste, they have to import garbage from the UK, Italy, Norway, and Ireland to feed the country's 32 waste-to-energy, or WTE, plants, a practice that has been in place for years. Every year, the average Swede produces about 461 kilograms of waste, a figure that's slightly below the half-ton European average. But what makes Sweden different is its use of a somewhat controversial program, incinerating over 2 million tons of trash per year. Before garbage can be trucked away to incinerator plants, trash is filtered by home and business owners. Organic waste is separated, paper picked from recycling bins, and any objects that can be salvaged and reused pulled aside. By Swedish law, producers are responsible for handling all costs related to collection and recycling or disposal of their products. If a beverage company sells bottles of pop at stores, the financial onus is on them to pay for bottle collection as well as related recycling or disposal costs. Rules introduced in the 1990s incentivized companies to make a more proactive, eco-conscious role and choice about what products they take to market. It was also a clever way to alleviate taxpayers of full waste management costs. According to data collected from Swedish recycling company Returpack, Swedes collectively return 1.5 billion bottles and cans annually. What can't be reused or recycled usually heads to WTE incineration plants. According to the communications director of Swedish Waste Management, Anna-Karin Gripvel, waste today is a commodity in a different way than it has been. It's not only waste, it's a business. When waste sits in landfills, leaking methane gas and other greenhouse gases, it is obviously not good for the environment. So Sweden focused on developing alternatives to reduce the amount of toxins seeping into the ground.
Everyone produces garbage. Sweden is no different, but it's what they do with that waste that is a bit unusual.
Swedes produce a fair amount of waste, approximately 460 kilos per person and a year, which amounts to 4.4 million tons every year. Less than 1% goes to landfill, and the rest is about 50-50 recycled and energy recovery.
With recycling and sorting of garbage a way of life, Sweden is able to convert much of its waste into energy. With its 32 incineration plants, Sweden is considered the world leader in the field of waste to energy, or energy recovery. In Helsingborg, in the south of Sweden, about 40% of households get their district heating from garbage incinerated at the brand new Filborna plant.
The waste that we use here comes from two main sources, the households and industrial waste. It is sorted, meaning that scrap metal, foodstuffs, glass, etc. has been sorted prior to incineration here. A good number to remember is that 3 tons of waste contains as much energy as 1 ton of fuel oil. So there's a lot of energy in waste.
In Sweden, we incinerate 2.2 million tons of household waste in these plants every year.
Despite the millions of tons of garbage produced by the Swedes, the plants have an overcapacity. This has led to an interesting business for Sweden, the importing of waste from other European countries.
Waste today is a commodity in a different way than it has been. It's not only waste, it's a business. We import approximately 800,000 tons yearly. We sell a service. It's mainly Norway, the UK, Ireland, Italy.
What we have here is imported English household waste. Each one of these weighs about 700 kilos. which corresponds to 200, 250 kilos of fuel oil in energy terms. So there's a lot of energy here. 20% of the fuel that we use here at the Fieldborna plant is imported primarily from England. It is sorted waste. Metals has been sorted out, glass has been sorted out, foodstuffs has been sorted out. The English authorities, the English government is increasing taxes on landfills every year. So there's a pressure on finding other solutions than landfills in England.
It seems like a win-win. Good business for Sweden and less landfill in Europe. But it's not without controversy. What about the environmental impacts of waste to energy?
Is this clean energy? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Compared to the alternative of landfill, this is a much better solution. Having said that, all incineration of waste must be done in a proper manner. We are at half of the levels that are actually permitted. So we are far below the emission levels that the authorities has demanded from us. In a European perspective, every year some 150 million tons are landfilled every year throughout Europe. So there are huge amounts of waste.
As we speak, EU is looking at the legislation and the Waste Framework Directive, and we think that they're going to suggest higher recycling targets and also more landfill bans.
I think in the long run, the world needs to produce less waste. The world has a garbage problem. In the meantime, waste incineration and extracting energy from the waste is a good solution.
What is perhaps most unfortunate about this story is the fact that it has taken so long for Sweden to achieve these current results. Lom writes that Sweden's success handling garbage didn't come overnight. The latest results are the fruits of a cultural shift decades in the making. Gripvel told Huffington Post Canada that starting in the 70s, Sweden adopted fairly strict rules and regulations when it comes to handling our waste, both for households and more municipalities and companies. A practice that is so common now that it is pretty much a natural way of living, fully ingrained into the Swedish mentality and also the society. In health news, we take a look first at one of the modalities I have come across of healing since arriving in Sweden. Over the coming weeks, I would like to explore a few of these stories. I would like to remind listeners that not everyone will resonate with all modalities of healing. Many people have become very good at marketing their spiritual messages and tools without consideration to the fact that some may just not benefit from that tool or message. If, however, you do resonate with a particular modality of healing, or there is something that interests you about it, then perhaps do some more exploration to see if it is something that may be able to help you in this current moment of now. As mentioned earlier, I have been receiving incredible assistance from a listener to CVN in Sweden, Fredrik. He has introduced me to a number of people in Sweden who can provide information and perhaps also help me in finding a place to work to support myself over here. I am very grateful for his efforts and for the people, of course, that I am now meeting. One of the individuals whom I've had the pleasure of connecting with is Carl Ryberg. Carl has founded a business called monochrome.se, or monochrome.se. It is a business that focuses on light therapy. And in a country where there is a lot of darkness during the winter season, the emphasis of light and its effect upon our physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual health becomes more apparent. In a very literal and figurative sense, Carl is a light worker. According to Monochrome's homepage, light is the very basis for the vigorous existence of most species and indispensable for navigation. With a speed of 300,000 kilometers per second, it is the fastest message carrier in nature. Evolution developed eyesight 500 million years ago to facilitate survival. All life forms are entirely dependent on the colors of light. Color means information, and strong optical signals have an enormous impact on biological systems. The color coding cones of our retina are much older than the degenerate rods, only performing in black and white. The most attractive visual stimulants lie in the monochromatic range, as seen in the sparkling iridescence of gratings and prisms, peacocks and scarabs. These supercolors have very high information value and are biologically closely related to laser light. Photons are a powerful optical software to the brain, and the human visual system is extremely sensitive to light variations. The deep influence on the human body rhythms is widely recognized. Our hormonal and emotional cycles are closely linked to the qualities of the ambient light. Light therapy is a key feature in modern healthcare and personal enhancement. Practical applications include chromatic psychotherapy and body treatment, vision training, and cognitive rehabilitation. Sound biologic lighting is a healthy antidote to modern light pollution. Monochrome has for 30 years specialized in photobiology to develop human potential. We have sophisticated photonic equipment and extensive libraries. We are founding members of the International Light Association and have a close cooperation with the Professional Lighting Design Association. CVN spoke with Carl Rydberg, the founder and owner of Monochrome, and he explains a bit about this modality of healing and what it offers. Carl starts out by sharing a bit of the genesis of this modality of healing for him and what brought him into this particular path.
I started light work back in the late 70s, and by that time there was nothing available in Scandinavia. So in England I went to what was known as the College of Psychotherapeutics, and they had light and color therapy. This is 70s with very simple equipment. Then I went back to Scandinavia and we started to make more sophisticated light projectors, and you have seen some of them. This is still 30 years ago. So after 35 years, we can now make light projectors, light communication. That wasn't possible before. Traditional color therapy has been around for a long while. It's been known since medieval time. It's been known since Hindu time and Egyptian times. But much of that was never very efficient. Of course, if it were efficient, the planet would have been transformed by now, and it isn't, obviously. So we need, for this millennium, we need a more efficient, we need more pinpointed, more directed forms of energy communication than have been available before. Monochromatic light, the light that we've been working with, is Greek, meaning one color. It's very close to laser light. It means that the information in color is much more specific than you have in normal colors. And for the people listening to us, this is a room with green curtains, but those curtains aren't green because it's a mixture of yellow and blue, which every painter knows. And me having a purple shirt, being a mixture, blue and red. But with light you can make a purple that is purple, a green that is green, a turquoise that is turquoise, which means that you feed correct information into your precious brain. We know that the brain is extremely sensitive to light and color. And this includes animals, simple bacteria, up to primates, up to humans, all react to light. It controls our body systems, our hormones, our sleep patterns, our appetite, our adrenaline, social patterns, all is controlled by light. Autumn equinox is coming in now, which means light is fading, people are getting winter blues, they're getting tired. The remedy is light. Many will go to Canary Islands or to Mallorca, Malaysia, to get that precious light. And you being Canadian, you know exactly what this means. So light is a remedy, and some friend of mine, Jacob Lieberman, wrote a beautiful book where he says light is the medicine of the future. And in a computer analogy, we would say that light is like a software to the brain. Because in old technology, you would go in, you would repair that computer, you dismantle it, and in modern, you would just replace the program. You would install another light program. You needn't even open the computer. You just install it. So that is the dimension of modern light work, so to say, which builds on the traditions, but many of the old traditions are too slow. They're completely valid, but Time is short, planet is in a crisis, children are impatient, and many of the old methods are just too slow.
We are witnessing a lifestyle at this time that keeps people out of the light. People are working indoors and kids are in front of computers. We have created a society of workaholics that keeps us from getting the needed frequencies of light. And then there is the issue of humans being told that we need sunscreen and sunglasses, which even further block these needed frequencies. What are your thoughts?
You would need a sunscreen if you're on a California beach, sailing at sea under a tropical sun. Of course, then the reflex is too hard. But apart from some very extreme situations, skiing in alpine sun, don't block the light. Don't block that sun. But it's like any remedy, you wouldn't overdo it. So we need especially ultraviolet light, but we need a lot more. We need infrared light, we need the colored light, and the body system, the biosystem, and the mind, they feed on this. But like you mentioned, we see a lack of light. People, youngsters, spend too much time in front of their computers. Computer screens are very lousy light screens with flickering light, highly biased light, disrupts the body rhythm. We don't spend enough time outdoors. Then we've had a fashion for the last 30 years, which is black. So many people wear black, removing the light from touching the skin, which means that the vitamin D is not accumulated. So the need of healthy, natural light is just like your basic food. Your bread and butter light would be good sunlight, especially at noon. Then occasionally you would want for therapeutic use, you say, I need my extra vitamins, it's winter, I feel tired, I haven't slept enough. Then you would top it up with high quality light, monochromatic light, laser light, polarized light is very interesting, super light you would say. But the basic fare is always sunlight, which cannot be paralleled. There's no artificial light source that's come near to sunlight. So just to give you a figure, in offices in Scandinavia there's a law that says you should have a minimum of 500 lux on your working surface. That's recommended for a desk or a bank or an office, 500 lux. And you would say, ooh, that's a lot, that's almost a glare. So you would say, no, in my sitting room at home I would rather just have 100 lux. That's much more comfy. Outdoors, on a sunny day like we'd have today, around midsummer you'd have 100,000 lux. That is our natural level of sunlight. So this continuous light starvation means sleep patterns are disrupted, and this is compensated with Coca-Cola or coffee or cigarettes or white sugar, but you get a salad of counteracting influences here.
What are the primary pieces of equipment you are working with, and how may these be used to address various conditions that people may be experiencing?
We've got two families of light therapy, so to say. One is ocular, via the eyes, and then it's usually colored light. Color means life. And in psychotherapy, feeding light onto the eyes, into the brain, means that it stimulates the brain. There we're speaking winter depression, you're speaking sleeplessness, you're speaking lack of confidence, but also say student says I've got an exam tomorrow, an actor says I've got a concert, I've got to be on top. So that's very much like a mental spark, a mental vitamin, or a visual vitamin you can say. Then the other input source is via the skin, where you have ultraviolet light, vitamin D, building your good skeleton, and in the other extreme you have infrared light, also invisible, circulation, muscle, tendons, known as non-visual stimulants. So this is what we're working with. Colored light, much to stimulate your brain, and non-colored light to stimulate your body. So one would be for the soul, the other one would be for the body, so to say. And what you have seen is we have one large dome looking like a planetarium, where you can enter, you can choose any form of monochromatic light, a smaller spherical helmet, same principle, and then there is a fiber optic mask that you also have seen, all projecting colored light into the eyes. This planet is in its teenage crisis. Many of us are behaving like children, like youngsters, and this has to improve very soon. So that's an aspect of the light therapy, that it will make us wiser, healthier, and extend our lifespans.
For those who come to see you, or for those who purchase a light therapy device, what might be a typical regimen to follow? Is there too much light?
Especially in the beginning, you wouldn't go out in that sharp sun and spend hours because you would just burn your skin. So working with monochromatic light, the treatment is 10 minutes, and you do that once a month. Much like a vaccination, just a tiny amount goes a long way. Homeopathy works on the same principle, small concentrated amounts. Then you get used to it, then you can go down to twice a month, and eventually once a week. Once a day would be too strong.
Okay.
Brain, body cells need to digest that information.
For those who are resonating with this modality of healing, there are some photos of the various types of equipment offered on his website. To find out more information, the website will be in the show summary. It is monochrome, monocrom.se, and he can be contacted for information about the various pieces of equipment also. And in this week's final words, I received an email from the petition group calling themselves Avaz this week. In the message to me, the sender, Rikin Patel, said, "I can sincerely say that this is the most important petition we've ever done." The thought immediately crossed my mind that if he is sincere in writing that, then this does not say very much for what the group has achieved overall. I immediately had to pull myself back as I realized that I was being judgmental. I realize that I see the challenges of our world from a very different perspective than this organization. I admit that it has frustrated me in the past that this group sends out petition after petition, attempting to address the many little fires in our world while asking for countless donations to address these little fires in our world, and yet they appear unwilling to go after the source of all those fires in the world. It has always been my personal feeling that the global cabal wants people to be distracted with fire after fire because it takes the spotlight off the bigger agenda that the cabal is attempting to do. As long as people are putting their valuable time, effort, energy, money, and resources into these fires, the global cabal, more often than not, ends up benefiting in some way directly and or indirectly because of it. It is another economically subtle way to keep people divided while depleting their already limited resources and energies. It may sound, perhaps, a bit cruel to initially hear that, and when I originally heard myself saying this, I wondered if it was cruel. Of course, we do not like seeing people suffering or seeing bad things happen in our world. Of course, we all want to create something better. We are all attempting to do so in our uniquely different yet equally beautiful way. From my personal perspective, it has not made sense to me why we continue to throw good money after bad, attempting to put out these fires, because the fires never seem to get put out. The fires continue to come back time and time again, requiring even more resources as the illusion called the cost of living continues to rise. Of course, this illusion is perpetuated by the criminally fraudulent fiat currencies linked to the fractional reserve model of banking. One aspect of the work I do for global peace is to try to find the ideal pattern of lining up dominoes. For those unfamiliar with dominoes, it was created first as a game, but then people got the idea that the dominoes can be placed upright, often in very elaborate patterns and creations. And when that first domino is pushed over, the wave of dominoes spreads out, with each domino knocking the next one after it, sometimes over many different directions, to ultimately arrive at the end. If done perfectly, the timing will line up, so everything comes to a conclusion at the final domino, at or around the same time. Finding those first key dominoes in our global society is not particularly hard. Humanity, however, seems to want to start knocking down dominoes in the middle of the creation before the whole pattern is set up. It therefore requires even greater effort and time to redo everything. A part of me has wondered if Avaz was created to be just such a distraction, to engage people in areas that interest them while taking the focus of the actions off of the global cabal itself. I have wondered why Avaz has not done any petitions to expose the fractional reserve system of banking or the system of commercial admiralty law, or why they have not sponsored their own petition on the disclosure of our galactic families. Although unable to prove it, I have had the feeling that Avaz has messed with my disclosure petition to prevent it from achieving greater recognition. My basis for this feeling comes from several failed attempts to contact them and have them answer my questions adequately. So with this global power base of activism, why are they not willing to go after the root sources of all the problems? I believe it is for the same reason that the University for Peace does not truly want peace in the world. UPeace, Avaz, and similar organizations want the glory and recognition of doing something allegedly good in the world, but they do not want that to disappear. In many ways, they and groups like them are behaving like charities. They are taking people's money, and yes, perhaps on some levels, some resources are being put into service, but the rest of the money goes to keep people employed. Of course, it was Upton Sinclair who is credited with saying that one cannot be expected to understand something when one's livelihood is dependent upon his or her not understanding it. In fairness to at least some of them, there may be those within these groups who sincerely believe that they are working for global change. It is the same for so many well-intentioned organizations and institutions. The honorable work of these individuals and organizations cannot become truly effective until we are able to locate and place them in the correct position within these global dominoes. Until it is clear that their work and their service is able to truly achieve the stated goal that it is claiming to do, then the questions have to be asked as to the real value of what is being offered, at least in its current form and at least in that current moment of now. Without having a political, corporate, and religious atmosphere that truly honors life, any money that is spent on anything becomes wasted money. Until people can see what is truly dysfunctional about these institutions and can find the courage to finally and effectively elect people who will demonstrate the courage to stand up to the structures and institutions of enslavement, it makes no sense to work for peace, for example, because the institution by its very nature exists on the energies of the exact opposite of that which it is claiming to want. The institutions that truly want change will become fully empowered to make change when the structures that enslave people to the opposite goal have been removed. The people of Sweden will have an opportunity to signal their intent to shift the energies of their country next week. The question will be whether or not they are willing to exercise their voice and their vote to achieve a goal that similar countries in Southern Europe could only achieve through protest and sometimes violence. If we are claiming to want to achieve peace in our world, then peace will not come from within the same paradigm of thinking that feeds and profits on the energies that are not peace, until we are willing to fully break that which we have been enslaved to, and accept that there will be some hardships during some kind of transition. The hardships are always less than waiting until we hit rock bottom and have to struggle to climb out of a much deeper and much more painful hole. At the European Union parliamentary elections last May, the anti-EU group made significant gains in representation. However, as has been mentioned before on this newscast, this body of elected representatives is only the illusion of power. The decision-making power lies within the European Commission, and this group is controlled by the more influential banking and elitist interests. Will the people of Sweden begin to make their voices known and perhaps create a new structure of governance where politicians will be forced to work together, as opposed to having the full power to blindly force through their agendas with the full and knowing consent of the people. Coming back to Avaz, however, I extend an invitation to the people at Avaz and to various other petition websites to work with the people of the world and help remove the institutions of enslavement governance through their activism. You can help by empowering your networks to push for the truth about the fractional reserve system of banking, the commercial system of admiralty law, the disclosure of our galactic families, the truth about 9/11, and thus the truth of all the lies since 9/11. And you can help expose the truth about shadow governments. Your work can help people to learn how to peacefully challenge those who claim to represent us, while helping people to also learn how to hold politicians accountable to their actions. The question is whether or not you as a group are truly willing to work for that which you are claiming to work for. Are you all content to just keep putting out fires because it pays your salary and it gives you a little sense of prestige, or are you ready to do something because it will create a world where jobs that are less life-honoring can be transitioned to or replaced by new jobs that are more life-honoring and in alignment with the new human and planetary consciousness? As I am personally seeing it, it is no longer a question of if. It is now a question of when. And if this when comes sooner, there will be some pain and discomfort, but definitely not as much pain if this when occurs later on down the road. Create a wonderful week until our next Moment of Now. So that is the unfolding consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is a part of the Inlight radio group of programs. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary on the blog at cosmicvisionnews.com, on the CVN Facebook page, and also on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that where the heart is willing, it will find 1,000 ways, but where it is unwilling, it will find 1,000 excuses. Until our next Moment of Now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.